Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the course Nutrition for the Family. This is the second module, that is dietary recommendations, and this is the last lecture in which we shall be studying about nutrient guidelines and food exchanges. I am Dr. Jaspreet Kaur, presently working as Associate Professor in Government College for Girls, Ludhiana, Punjab, affiliated to Punjab University, Chandigarh, and this project is funded by DTH Swayamprabha, MHRD, New Delhi. In the last lecture, we had studied about the dietary guidelines for Indians, and then we studied what are the dietary goals, and then we studied about the 15 dietary guidelines given by ICMR, National Institute of Nutrition. And in this lecture, we shall be studying about nutrient requirement for Indians, a report of the expert group 2020. We shall be getting the glimpse of these recommendations, and in the last leg of this lecture, we shall be studying about food exchanges, food exchange lists, and using the food exchange list for menu planning. So let's start. In the last few lectures of this module, we have studied about the concept of RDI, that is recommended dietary intakes. We have studied about food groups, we have studied about food guides, and we have also studied about the dietary guidelines for Indians. And in the last year, that is 2020, a report of expert group has been released by ICMR, National Institute of Nutrition, that is known as Nutrient Guidelines for Indians, which was revised after 2010. And so, what are the highlights of these nutrient guidelines? We have been following nutrient guidelines where the requirements they were planned and evaluated with the recommended dietary allowances. But in this new document, the committee has followed a modified approach for various recommendations. They have replaced the existing RDA, that is recommended dietary allowance. So instead of using only RDA, they have modified and they have included other recommendations. It has 4 components. So what are these 4 components? We have already studied in the first lecture. They are EAR, that is estimated average requirement. Then we studied RDA. This is the same recommended dietary allowance which we had been following in the previous recommended guidelines. Then along with that, there is another component that is known as TUL, that is tolerable upper limit. And along with that, the 4th component is AI, that is adequate intake. So depending upon their suitability, all of these recommendations, they are recommended to be used as the guidelines for either populations or individuals. So let us study what are the macronutrient recommendations and some important guidelines for the populations and individuals given in this document. Let's quickly revise what we had studied in the first lecture about RDIs. We had discussed about the first concept, that is EAR. As we can see in this bell-shaped curve, that EAR is the average of requirement of almost 50% of the population. And if we tell people, if we recommend people to eat any nutrient at this level, the chances of adequacy of 50% of the population is ensured, whereas 50% of the population which is left behind, they might get some nutrient adequacies. And along with that, we have studied the next concept, that is RDA. Here what we do, we increase the daily nutrient requirement, that is the amount, to see that majority of the population, that means around 98% of the population, is able to meet their requirement, and the chances of inadequacy of any kind of nutrient, that is barely 2 to 2.5%. And along with that, the third concept is known as tolerable upper limit. So this graph is showing we are increasing the amount of nutrient from EAR to RDA, where we have what we have done, the basic nutrient requirements, and along with that we have given some element of security for so that in case the person needs little more than average, he also gets his nutrient requirements properly met. And after that, this what this TUL explains, this TUL concept explains that how much amount of nutrient can be taken which is biologically tolerable. So we can increase the intake to a certain level, and after if we keep on increasing the intake of a particular nutrient which is after TUL, which is more than a total tolerable upper limit, the chances of getting excess intake, they will be more. So as we can see, the EAR is sufficient to meet the needs of 50% of population, and when we are recommending something according to RDA, the chances of inadequacy is barely 2.5%. Now let us understand this concept further. The guidelines for populations, they are based on EAR and they are not based on RDA, as we have seen in the previous slide also, as we expect the risk of inadequacy of any nutrient to be around 50%. That means we expect that 50% of our healthy population, they will be able to meet their requirements if they eat according to EAR. And of course, there might be some modification required in case we find that in a population there is a condition where we have to increase the amount above EAR. For example, there might be some populations who are purely vegetarians. So their iron absorption levels, they will be slightly lower than the others who are non-vegetarians or who are on mixed diet. So what happens in such populations, this amount can be increased from the EAR in the guidelines. And similarly, at the same time, there are some nutrients where the gap between the EAR and tolerable upper limit is very narrow. So there are chances, if the people they keep on taking certain kind of nutrient in the larger amount, the chances of toxicity or the chances of excess intake, they might also happen. So in such cases we need to closely monitor and evaluate even the population RDAs. The guidelines for individuals, they are based on the fact that if we take a nutrient in the amount equal to our requirement, we would prevent a deficiency of that nutrient in most healthy people, that is just equivalent to EAR. But to make sure that we do not suffer from diseases as well as we enjoy a good state of health, we need to make sure that we take the nutrient in little extra amount over and above the minimum requirement. This is called safety margin. Now this safety margin, it is needed to cover certain factors, that is it could be variation in the requirement of one individual and another, or it could be period of low intake if we are fasting for some time, or if we are sick, we are not taking food for a short period of time. So if the nature of diet is different, this might change the nutrient requirement, or there could be some cooking practices where there are certain cooking losses. So all these factors of variations, they are to be taken into account when we recommend RDA. So what is RDA? It is basic requirement. Along with that, we have added two SD, that is your standard deviation. This is the margin of safety. So requirement plus safety margin is equal to RDA. So these guidelines for Indians, they consider RDA and not EAR in case. But if meeting of RDA is not possible, then the intake should be between the EAR, that is the basic requirement, average requirement, and the RDA, that is where we have added the safety margin. But we have to carefully monitor and evaluate if we see any symptoms of excess or inadequacy. Now, let us briefly explore the major nutrient recommendations which are extracted from these RDA 2020 guidelines. According to ICMR and National Institute of Nutrition RDA 2020, during the last decade, there has been advancement in the research where it has found that there is paradigm shift in the nutritional status of the population. And RDAs of nutrients of Indians, they have been revised by the expert committee, therefore. And there have been substantial changes which are made in especially energy requirements of adults, because they have considered that Indians, they are becoming more and more sedentary, and their basal metabolic rates, they are far different from the Western population. So that is why for the energy recommendations, BMR, that is our basal metabolic rate, that is a rate at which our body is performing its involuntary activities. And along with that, physical activity level, that is known as PAL. These two values, they are taken into consideration. And this current committee, it has used 10% and 9% reduction of basal metabolic rate for males and females in the present situation. So that is why there are major changes in the energy requirements in RDA 2020 recommendations. If we see this table, energy requirement, they have not given any RDA for that, as we have studied the concept of RDA, which is your EAR plus 2 standard deviations. Therefore, it is stated that EAR table that can be followed. This is because any amount greater than the estimated energy requirement will lead to increased weight and obesity, and it will enhance the chances of morbidity, that means of non-communicable diseases. So if we see this table, we will come to know that for men, for women, for infant, children, boys and girls of different ages, they have defined certain reference body weights, and according to that requirements, they are set on the per kg body weight. So for example, for a sedentary worker man, it is set as 32 kilocalorie per kg per day. And if the body weight is 65, so that requirement falls as 2110 kilocalories. So same is true for all the age groups. So this is the kilocalorie per kg per day. This is the body weight, and according to the physical activity level, the EAR has been used to recommend the energy requirements. Coming to protein, it is recommended that the safe protein requirement for healthy Indian adult is 0.83 gram per kilogram of the ideal body weight per day. And this recommendation also tells us that the ideal ratio of cereal, legumes, and milk should be, we should take 3 parts of cereal, 1 part of legumes, and 2.5 parts of milk to get good quality proteins. And this is the summary of recommended protein requirements for the Indians in the RDA. As we have just seen, for the all age groups, they have recommended different values, and based on this EAR, RDAs, they can be followed. If we are planning the diet for the populations, then we will be focusing on EAR. If we are planning it for individuals, then we can always consider RDA. And along with that, we can see they have mentioned the tolerable upper limit also, that what percentage of protein can be taken in a healthier amount. And if we see this table, they have given additional guideline that for people who are consuming cereal based diet, which is having low quality proteins, the protein requirements are increased, that is 1 gram per kg per day. So for men it becomes 65 gram per day, and for women it becomes 55 grams per day. Coming to fats and oils, the recommendations, they are directed towards meeting the requirements for optimal fetal growth, then for growth of infant, and development of children of their growing age, and then maternal health if she is pregnant, and combating chronic energy deficiency, people who do not consume sufficient energy and they get deficiency disorders, and to avoid that. And on the other side, to avoid diet related non-communicable diseases, which are the byproduct of excessive consumption of fat and excess consumption of energy. And an effort has been based on the physical activity parameters also, because initially in the previous RDA it was not accounting for the type of physical activity. So here the new recommended dietary allowances, they have given due consideration to the physical activity parameter also. So let us see the requirements of fats. Here, if we see, these are the recommendations of dietary fat for Indians. And if we see the adult man, adult woman, infant, children, boys and girls, what these recommendations suggest? They suggest that according to the physical activity, for example, an adult man who is sedentary, he needs 25 gram of visible fat, and a moderate person needs 30 grams, and a heavy worker needs 40 gram of visible fat. Coming to adult women, it is 20, 25 and 30 based on their physical activity. And along with that, there is another, in the details they have told that the minimum level of total fat as a part of energy should be 20. That means that 20% of the calories should come from fats. These are the minimum requirements. And along with that, they have further specified that of the total amount of fat which we are taking, 50% should come from the foods which contain hidden fat, not the visible fat, what we put in our tarkas, and what we can see. It's not visible. So partial, half of the portion should come from food sources and half of the fat should come from the visible sources. So along with that, if we see, there are other recommendations for optimizing the quality of fat. It is not only the quantity of fat that we have taken 25 grams or 20 grams or 30 grams. The quality of fats is also very important. So what these guidelines, they suggest that we should increase the N3 PUFAs, that is N3 polyunsaturated fatty acid, because they contribute to lifelong health and well-being. They also recommend to minimize trans fatty acids and to increase monounsaturated fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids, because they have various health functions. So this is further, they have given guidance regarding the approximate fatty acid composition of dietary fats and oils which are consumed in our country. So if we see here, like in the last slide we have seen, they have recommended that we should take more of MUFAs. So they have categorized different type of fats in various categories. Certain type of fats, they are rich in high, medium chain saturated fatty acid. So under this category, coconut oil, palm kernel oil, butter and ghee, they are found. And then we have another second category that contains high saturated fatty acid and high in monounsaturated fatty acids. So for example, palm oil, that is a fat which comes in this category. Then the third category is high MUFA and moderate linolenic acid. So groundnut oil, rice bran oil, sesame oil, they are also considered good fats. And then we have another category that is high linoleic acid. So it contains cottonseed, corn, safflower, sunflower oils. And then next category is which contains high amount of linoleic acid and alpha linoleic acid. So these are soybean, it is canola, mustard oil or rapeseed oil and flax oils. And along with that, they have also highlighted that there are fats which are rich in trans fatty acids which are to be avoided. So as we know, vanaspati is high in trans fatty acid. So this kind of guidelines, they can actually help us in deciding what kind of fat should be included to make a healthy and balanced diet. Coming to carbohydrates, a minimum intake of 100 to 130 gram of carbohydrates daily should be ensured for the age group 1 year and above, because we need this much amount for the maintenance of brain glucose utilization. So therefore, people who are having some fat diets, or people who have modified their diets and they are avoiding carbohydrates, this guidelines is very important to be considered, because we need minimum 100 to 130 gram of carbohydrates so that the other nutrients, they are properly utilized by the body. For the first time, this committee has considered recommendation of fiber based on energy intake, and for that, level of about 30 gram per 2000 kilocalorie diet has been considered as safe intake. As in the previous slides, we have studied about the concept of EAR, and then we have studied about the recommended dietary allowance. But there are some cases where we do not have either EAR or RDAs. So it is a scientific guess. It is based on certain studies of on large group of people, of healthy people, and it is decided that what kind and what amount of nutrient these people, they are taking, and they are adequately fed, and they are not suffering from any say excess of that nutrient, or they are not deficient of that nutrient. So that level is known as AI. So for dietary fiber, as we see in this table, there has been recommendation and that this is AI as per 1000 kilocalorie of diet. If the person is taking around 2000 kilocalorie, so AI would be 30 gram daily. So now we have studied about the energy requirement, carbohydrate, protein and fat requirements which are suggested by the expert committee in the RDA 2020. So now they have consolidated it in a table, and they have given it the name of acceptable macronutrient distribution range by age and physiological group as percent of energy. This means that what should be the percent contribution of each of these macronutrient, that means carbohydrate, protein and fat. So let us study that this recommendation says, if we talk about protein in let us say in adult, the amount taken through the protein should be in the range of 5% to 15% of the total calories. We know that a gram of protein gives 4 calories. So the calories coming from proteins, it should be within the range of 5 to 15% in case of adults. And if we talk about total fat, it should be in the range of 15%, that is minimum, and maximum can be 35%. And after that, as I have already discussed that the quantity of fat is important, but along with that, the quality of fat, the source from which we are procuring this fat is also very important. So these guidelines, they have further specified to make our diets healthier, we should include both N6 polyunsaturated fatty acids and N3 polyunsaturated fatty acids. And they have suggested a ratio that is 4 to 10 parts can be N6 polyunsaturated fatty acids, and 0.5 to 1 part it can be N3 polyunsaturated fatty acids. And the third macronutrient, that is carbohydrate, it should provide 45 to 65% of our calories. And as we can see, these are the recommendations which have been given. And along with that, if we see the bottom guidelines, they say that the protein energy ratio, that means the contribution of energy provided by protein, it will depend upon the protein quality and how much total energy we are taking. So along with that, the ideal ratio of N6 to N3 is 5 to 10 parts of N6 and 1 part of N3. And along with that, as we have seen in the previous slide, for the carbohydrate, it has been recommended the people should consume minimum 100 to 130 gram of carbohydrates, and at least 20 grams of fat from the food sources should be taken. It is from the food sources means the invisible fat, so that we are able to meet the basic requirements. And along with that, there is summary of recommended intakes for other minerals also, for phosphorus, for sodium, potassium, copper, manganese, chromium, and selenium. So now let's see in this table, it has given key micronutrients in food groups. So they have categorized different food groups as we have already studied, and they have very clearly mentioned in the guidelines that what is the contribution of important micronutrients. So these important micronutrients which they have identified are iron, zinc, vitamin A, riboflavin, that is vitamin B2, then dietary folate, and along with that vitamin B12. These are the key micronutrients, and this table they have very specifically categorized that how much amount of each micronutrient we are likely to get if we include foods from one specific food group. For example, if we take cereals, so taking 100 gram of edible portion from the cereal is good to get 3 milligrams of iron, 2.16 milligram of zinc, 2.43 micrograms of vitamin A, zero point 0.15 milligram of riboflavin, and 24.03 micrograms of dietary folate, and it is nil. It does not contain any vitamin B12. So when we are planning diets, it is important that we can consider the contribution of each food group. So similarly, the case coming to the pulses, it contains 5 milligram of iron, and just like that, we have leafy vegetables, other vegetables, roots and tubers, fruits, milk of buffalo, milk cow, egg, chicken, mutton, beef, fish, and liver. As we can see and identify, taking the case liver, it contains 6.3 milligram of iron, it contains very good amount of zinc, it contains 66.19 milligram of vitamin A, it contains 0.36 milligram of B2, that is riboflavin. It contains 92 microgram of dietary folate, and it is the richest source of vitamin B12. So this is how they have consolidated that, how we can choose the right food to take proper nutrient according to our recommended dosage. Water, as we know, it is an important component of our healthy diet. So this new RDA 2020 has also included this important component. And if we see in this table, they have clearly given that according to the various age groups, ranging from children and then their gender and then adulthood, that how much of water is to be taken to ensure good health. So here they have given the body weight, and after that there is energy requirement, and along with that they have recommended that what should be the total water should be taken, and along with that they have further clarified that how much of water should come from food and how much of water should come from the beverages. And along with that, they have further specified that water requirement from beverages, how we can calculate how many milliliters per kg body weight. It should be calculated like that. So they have been very scientifically decided, and for our convenience, we can see that for children 1 to 3 year, 4 to 6 year, and then 7 to 9 years, coming to boys and then girls, and for adults and for adult women, pregnant and lactating women. That means they have considered even the physiological conditions of the uh, females. So here, as we can see, let us take it as a one of the example. For a sedentary man who is weighing 65 kilograms, his energy requirements say they are 2110. So what he needs 3 liter, more than 3 liters. That means 3 liters and 150 ml. And out of it, the water from food should be 1100 ml, and 2 liters that should come from the beverages. That means the it comes to be 32 milliliter per kg body weight is the requirement. So if we have to calculate how much of water it is needed, so these are the calculation factors which can be used. So for example, a woman who is a heavy worker, she needs 52 milliliter per kg body weight. So these are the recommendations of water. This document also contains nutrient recommendations for elderly also. So our Indian elderlies, they have got their own set of RDAs now. So as we can see in this table, just like the normal population of adults, they have given similar recommendations for the elderly also. And although we know that during the old age, the requirement of energy, it is decreased. So therefore recommendations of for the other nutrients except vitamin D and calcium, they are maintained similar to adults to ensure that they get the good nutrient density. So therefore elderlies, they are encouraged to consume nutrient dense foods. That means the quality is more important than the quantity, and they should include nuts, oil seeds, fruits, vegetables, legumes, and flesh foods to meet the daily requirements of vitamins and minerals, to prevent multiple micronutrient malnutrition, which is very common during the old age, and they are encouraged to remain physically active. Let's summarize what we have studied in this lecture. We studied about the nutrient recommendations for Indians, a report of expert groups 2020 given by Indian Council of Medical Research, National Institute of Nutrition. And in this document, we studied that it has given guidelines for the populations and how they are different from the guidelines for the individuals. We studied that how in detail the guidelines regarding macronutrients are provided. In this, we studied what are the energy requirements, then the carbohydrate requirement, fat requirement, protein requirements. And along with that, we saw that this document provides the sourcing and in detail how to take that nutrient in the desirable amount. Then we studied about the dietary recommendation regarding fiber, regarding water, and lastly, we studied about the dietary recommendations for the elderly. We shall continue it further in the next lecture. Thank you very much.